Hi, third graders. I'm back to read a little more of our book, Because of Winn Dixie, by DiCamillo, and we are going to be beginning on chapter 8. I'm going to read 3 chapters, 8, 9, and 10. And we left off with Opal becoming friends with Miss Franny in the library, and how she was able to introduce Winn Dixie to Miss Franny as well in the library, and how they're becoming good friends, and how she told the story about the bear in the library, and it was kind of a silly story that Miss Franny told to Opal, and she told her the story because she thought that Winn Dixie looked like a bear when he was up on his hind legs and put his paws in the window and was looking in the window. So we're going to pick up where we left off. So now we are on chapter 8. Winn Dixie's bald spots started growing fur, and the fur that he had to begin with started looking shiny and healthy. And he didn't limp anymore, and you could tell that he was proud of looking so good, proud of not looking like a stray. I thought what he needed most was a collar and a leash, so I went into Gertrude's Pets, where there were fish and snakes and mice and lizards and gerbils and pet supplies, and I found a real handsome red leather collar with a matching leash. Winn Dixie was not allowed to come inside the store. There was a big sign on the door that said, "No dogs allowed." So I held the collar and the leash up to the window, and Winn Dixie, who was standing on the other side of the window, pulled up his lip and showed me all of his teeth and sneezed and wagged his tail, something furious. So I knew he absolutely loved that leash and collar combination. But it was very expensive. I decided to explain my situation to the man behind the counter. So I said, "I don't get a big enough allowance to afford something this fancy, but I love this collar and leash, and so does my dog, and I was thinking that maybe you could set me up on an installment plan." "Installment plan," said the man. "Gertrude!" somebody screamed in a real irritating voice. I looked around. It was a parrot. She was sitting on top of one of the fish tanks looking right at me. "An installment plan," I said, ignoring the parrot. "You know, where I promise to give you my allowance every week and you give me the leash and the collar now?" "I don't think I can do that," said the man. He shook his head. "No, the owner, she wouldn't like that." He looked down at the counter. He wouldn't look at me. He had thick black hair, and it was slicked back like Elvis Presley's. He had on a name tag that said, "Otis." "Or I could work for you," I said. "I could come in and sweep the floors and dust the shelves and take out the trash. I could do that." I looked around Gertrude's Pets. There was sand and sunflower seed shells and big dust bunnies all over the floor. I could tell it needed to be swept. Said Otis. He looked down at the counter some more. "Gertrude!" The parrot screamed again. "I'm real trustworthy," I said. "I'm new in town, but my daddy's a preacher. He's the preacher at the Open Arms Baptist Church in Naomi, so I'm real honest. But the only thing is, Winn Dixie, my dog, he would have to come inside with me, because if we get separated for too long, he starts to howl something terrible." "Gertrude doesn't like dogs," says Otis. "Is she the owner?" I asked. No. He finally looked up. He pointed at the fish tank. "That Gertrude, the parrot. I named her after the owner." "Gertrude's a pretty bird," screamed Gertrude. "She might like Winn Dixie," I told Otis. "Almost everybody does. Maybe he could come inside and meet her, and if the two of them get along, then I could have the job." "Maybe," Otis mumbled. He looked down at the counter again. So I went and opened the door, and Winn Dixie came trotting on inside the store. "Dog!" screamed Gertrude. "I know that," Otis told her. And then Gertrude got real quiet. She sat on top of the fish tank and cocked her head from one side to the other, looking at Winn Dixie. And Winn Dixie stood and stared right back at her. He didn't hardly move. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't smile. He didn't sneeze. He just stared at Gertrude, and she stared at him, and then she spread her wings out real far and flew and landed on top of Winn Dixie's head. "Dog!" she croaked. Winn Dixie wagged his tail just a tiny little bit, and Otis said, "You can start on Monday." "Thank you," I told him. "You won't be sorry." On the way out of Gertrude's Pets, I said to Winn Dixie, "You're better at making friends than anybody I have ever known. I bet if my mama knew you, she would think you were the best dog ever." Winn Dixie was smiling up at me, and I was smiling down at him, and so neither one of us was looking where we were going, and we almost bumped into Sweetie Pie Thomas. She was standing there sucking the knuckle of her third finger, staring at the window of Gertrude's Pets. She took her fingers out of her mouth and looked at me. Her eyes were all big and round. "Was that bird sitting on that dog's head?" she asked. She had her hair tied up in a ponytail with a pink ribbon. But it wasn't much of a ponytail. It was mostly ribbon and a few strands of hair. "Yes," I told her. "I seen it," she said. She nodded her head and put her knuckle back in her mouth. Then she took it out again real quick. "I seen that dog in church, too. He was catching a mouse. I want a dog just like it, but my mama won't let me get no dog. She says if I'm real good, I might get to buy me a goldfish or one of them gerbils. That's what she says. Can I pet your dog? Sure, I told her. Sweetie Pie stroked Winn Dixie's head so long and serious that his eyes drooped half closed and drool started coming out of the side of his mouth. I'm going to be 6 years old in September. I gotta stop sucking my knuckle once I'm 6, said Sweetie Pie. I'm having a party. Do you want to come to my party? The theme is pink. Sure, I told her. Can this dog come? She asked. You bet, I told her. And all of a sudden I felt happy. I had a dog. I had a job. I had Miss Franny Block for a friend. And I had my first invitation to a party in Naomi. It didn't matter that it came from a 5-year-old, and the party wasn't until September. I didn't feel so lonely anymore. Chapter 9. Just about everything that happened to me that summer happened because of Winn Dixie. For instance, without him I would never have met Gloria Dump. He was the one who introduced us. What happened was this. I was riding my bike home from Gertrude's Pets, and Winn Dixie was running along beside me. We went past Dunlap and Stevie Dewberry's house, and when Dunlap and Stevie saw me, they got on their bikes and started following me. They wouldn't ride with me. They just rode behind me and whispered things that I couldn't hear. Neither one of them had any hair on his head because their mama shaved their heads every week during the summer, because that one time Dunlap got fleas in his hair from their cat, Sadie. And now they look like 2 identical bald-headed babies, even though they weren't twins. Dunlap was 10 years old like me, and Stevie was 9, and tall for his age. I can hear you, I hollered back at them. I can hear what you're saying. But I really couldn't. Winn Dixie started to race way ahead of me. You better watch out, Dunlap hollered. That dog's headed right for the witch's house. Winn Dixie, I called, but he kept on going faster and hopped a gate and went into the most overgrown jungle of a yard I had ever seen. You better go get your dog out of there, Dunlap said. The witch will eat that dog, Stevie said. Shut up, I told them. I got off my bike and went up to the gate and hollered, Winn Dixie, you better come on out of there. But he didn't. She's probably eating him right now, Stevie said. He and Dunlap were standing behind me. She eats dogs all the time. Get lost, you bald-headed babies, I said. Hey, said Dunlap, that ain't a very nice way for a preacher's daughter to talk. He and Stevie backed up a little. I stood there and thought for a minute. I finally decided that I was more afraid of losing Winn Dixie than I was of having to deal with a dog-eating witch. So I went through the gate and into the yard. That witch is going to eat the dog for dinner, and you for dessert, Stevie said. We'll tell the preacher what happened to you, Dunlap shouted after me. By then I was deep in the jungle. There was every kind of thing growing everywhere. There were flowers and vegetables and trees and vines. Winn Dixie, I said. Heh heh heh, I heard. This dog sure likes to eat. I went around a really big tree all covered in moss, and there was Winn Dixie. He was eating something right out of the witch's hand. She looked up at me. This dog sure likes peanut butter, she said. You can always trust a dog that likes peanut butter. She was old and crinkly with brown skin. She had a big floppy hat with flowers all over it, and she didn't have any teeth. But she didn't look like a witch. She looked nice, and Winn Dixie liked her, I could tell. I'm sorry he got in your garden, I said. You ain't got to be sorry, she said. I enjoy a little company. My name's Opal, I told her. My name's Gloria Dump, she said. Ain't that a terrible name, Dump? My last name is Baloney, I said. Sometimes the kids back home at Watley called me lunch meat. Ha! Gloria Dump laughed. What about this dog? What do you call him? Winn Dixie, I said. Winn Dixie thumped his tail on the ground. He tried smiling, but it was hard with his mouth all full of peanut butter. Winn Dixie? Gloria Dump said. You mean like the grocery store? Yes, ma'am, I said. Whoo-wee, she said. That takes the strange name prize, don't it? Yes, ma'am, I said. I was just fixing to make myself a peanut butter sandwich, she said. You want one too? All right, I said. Yes, please. Go on and sit down, she said, pointing at a lawn chair with the back all busted out of it. But sit down and be careful. I sat down carefully, and Gloria Dump made me a peanut butter sandwich on white bread. Then she made one for herself and put her false teeth in to eat it. When she was done, she said to me, You know, my eyes ain't too good at all. I can't see nothing but the general shape of things, so I got to rely on my heart. Why don't you go on and tell me everything about yourself, so as I can see you with my heart? And because Winn Dixie was looking up at her like she was the best thing he'd ever seen, and because the peanut butter sandwich had been so good, and because I'd been wanting for a long time to tell some person everything about me, I did. Chapter 10. I told Gloria Dump everything. I told her how me and the preacher had just moved to Naomi and how I had to leave all my friends behind. I told her about my mama leaving, and I listed out all the 10 things that I knew about her. And I explained that here in Naomi, I missed Mama more than I ever had in Watley. I told her about the preacher being like a turtle, hiding all the time inside his shell. I told her about finding Winn Dixie in the produce department and how because of him I became friends with Miss Franny Block and got the job working for a man named Otis at Gertrude's Pets and got invited to Sweetie Pie Thomas's birthday party. I even told Gloria Dump how Dunlap and Stevie Dewberry call her a witch, but I told her they were stupid, mean, bald-headed boys, and I didn't believe them, not for long anyhow. And the whole time I was talking, Gloria Dump was listening. She was nodding her head and smiling and frowning and saying, and is that right? I could feel her listening with all her heart, and it felt good. You know what? She said when I was all done. What? Could be that you got more of your mama in you than just red hair and freckles and running fast. Really? I said. Like what? Like maybe you got her green thumb. The two of us could plant something and see how it grows. Test your green thumb out. Okay, I said. What Gloria Dump picked for me to grow was a tree, or she said it was a tree. To me, it looked more like a plant. She had me dig a hole for it and put it in the ground and pat the dirt around it tight, like it was a baby and I was tucking it into bed. What kind of tree is it? I asked Gloria Dump. It's a wait-and-see tree, she said. What does that mean? It means you gotta wait for it to grow up before you know what it is. Can I come back and see it tomorrow? I asked. Child, she said, as long as this is in my garden, you're welcome in it. But that tree ain't going to have changed much by tomorrow. But I want to see you, too, I said. Said Gloria Dump. I ain't going nowhere. I'll be right here. I woke Winn Dixie up then. He had peanut butter in his whiskers, and he kept yawning and stretching. He licked Gloria Dump's hand before we left, and I thanked her. That night, when the preacher was tucking me into bed, I told him how I got a job at Gertrude's Pets, and I told him all about making friends with Miss Franny Block and getting invited to Sweetie Pie's party, and I told him about meeting Gloria Dump. Winn Dixie lay on the floor waiting for the preacher to leave so he could hop up on the bed like he always does. When I was done talking, the preacher kissed me good night, and then he leaned way over and gave Winn Dixie a kiss too, right on top of his head. You can go ahead and get up there now, he said to Winn Dixie, so he already knows. Winn Dixie looked at the preacher. He didn't smile at him, but he opened his mouth wide like he was laughing, like the preacher had just told him the funniest joke in the world. And this is what amazed us both the most. The preacher laughed right back. Winn Dixie hopped up on the bed, and the preacher got up and turned out the light. I leaned over and kissed Winn Dixie too, right on the nose, but he didn't notice. He was already asleep and snoring. So we'll stop there. We'll continue after break with more of our story because of Winn Dixie. I hope you're enjoying listening to it, and I hope you are enjoying learning all about Opal and her adventures. I will see you guys soon. Bye.